Here we go. What people keep getting wrong about personal statements. Okay, I need you to listen carefully. I want this particular video to be the first and the last thing you think of when you're working on your personal statements. I don't want you to listen to terrible advice from well-meaning people. I want my voice to be the one that haunts you as you work on your personal statement. This could be for graduate school, this could be for college applications, wherever else. Because the truth is that people have overcomplicated the personal statement and got you thinking about all this extra stuff that I think misses the point. So what I'm trying to give you is a definitive breakdown on how to write an effective personal statement. Okay? All right. So this is my first real actual video giving you content. First off, let me introduce myself. My name is Albert Shen. I have been a philosophy professor at Pasadena City College for, at the time of this video, I think 8 years or so. But more importantly, I have taught courses in standardized exams of all kind, including SAT and AP classes, done college consulting, helping students with their college application, and so on for 2 decades now, probably longer. I forgot how old I am. I'm honestly creating this video just out of sheer frustration with all the confusing and useless advice that people give on the internet about the college application process. I don't blame students. I blame everyone else that's putting out whatever they think is going on without actually knowing, because they've never been on the admission side of things and they don't have the experience to be able to speak on it. Also, I just don't like repeating myself. So, you know, it's really annoying. Like, it's exhausting. I find it absolutely just a waste of my time. So this is actually the very reason I created my podcast in the first place. And this is why many of you who are listening to this right now, you're probably one of my students who I told you to just watch this video before I help you with your college applications. The point is that you don't need to do some deep, extensive research on how to write a good personal statement. The core of effective personal statements has been more or less the same for decades now. So I want people to just listen up closely, take what I say, try to apply it, jot down some notes to kind of remind yourself of some of the core principles here, and see for yourself just how much better your personal statements come out if you have the correct understanding of what these personal statements are really about. Okay. So let's get started with the basics. What is the point of a personal statement? All right. Your goal in a personal statement is twofold. One, to be as informative as possible, and two, connect with the reader. Okay? It's to make sure that you maintain their attention. They don't get bored. They don't feel that way and then want to toss your application aside. Okay. I'll start with the first point, the informative part, because I think that's the easiest one to understand and to address. Look at your application on the whole, right? So like when you're applying for anything, just look through your application and all the different material they ask for. I'll stick mostly to college applications, right? So they're going to ask you for a GPA, what classes you took, yada, yada, right? They're going to ask you for extracurriculars, work experience, whatever you have on the application, okay? If you repeat the rest of your application, what's on the rest of your application in your personal statement, it will suck. Your personal statement will suck. Why? Because you're not saying anything new. The personal statement is your chance to present information that cannot be provided elsewhere in your application. So why would you waste precious space on just repeating stuff? Okay? So before you work on this essay, take stock of what information is missing in the rest of your application and just start listing them off. Okay? Because what you're going to try to do in your personal statement should be to add new information. Okay? Now, if I put it this way, you're probably going to be confused about exactly what extra information you should put down. So I'm going to give you a list of some things to consider, some common places where you could explore ideas for what to include that isn't in the other parts of your application. Okay? All right. Number one, why did you do the activities that you did? Why did you make the choices in your education that you did? Okay. The rest of the application has the what, information about what you actually did, right? What it doesn't have is exactly why, right? What is your own personal history that makes it clear why you were interested in learning the things or doing the activities that you ended up doing, right? This could be something about your childhood that sparks some curiosity. It could be connected to your personality. Maybe there is some bigger vision that you have in mind that has nothing to do directly with the specific work that's reflected in your other parts of your application, but is somehow going to prepare you for accomplishing some bigger vision that you have. I don't know, right? Here's some ways to answer the question though, right? But I want to make clear, these are just examples, okay? And not meant to be some prototype for anything, right? It's just to help to get your own reflections going, okay? So here's one possibility. Like, say I want to be a vet, like a veterinarian. So in high school, I worked at the animal shelter volunteering for hours, okay? So why did I want to be a vet? Okay, so like it's on the application already that I did this volunteering activity. Why did I want to do this activity? Like, what got me into it? Okay, so this is information that's not on the other parts of the application. Well, maybe when I was 8 years old, I had a puppy that got sick, but there was no vet within a 20-mile radius because I lived in some rural area far away from any, city. And by the time I took my puppy to the nearest vet, it was too late and I had to bury my puppy. It was so painful that I vowed never to let another animal who can get care go without that care, right? So starting in elementary school, I studied anatomy, trying to understand how different animal bodies worked, what kind of care they needed. Maybe I, tried to treat any injured animal I saw in the field that was in my backyard or something. I have no idea. Okay? Whatever it was, you started taking in stray animals, maybe. I don't know. The rest of your application might say, look, I want to be a vet and I volunteered and clearly I care about animals, right? Okay, that's what your application elsewhere shows. Your personal statement could expand on why you want to be a vet, right? What motivated you to get into it in the first place, why and how you're super passionate and, like it's something particularly meaningful for you. All right. Another thing you could go ahead and look into, right? Number 2, what was the context in which you did all the things that you did? Okay, let me explain. Again, you're trying to bring in information that's not elsewhere in the application. Again, that's your goal, is to be informative, right? To add more information than what could be found elsewhere. You accomplished this and that. Let's say your GPA, your SAT scores, this award, that internship. Okay. But what is the context in which you did those things? By that, I mean, like, what were the circumstances that, you lived in, that you had the circumstances you had to deal with in your life that, maybe shed some light on those accomplishments and the, weight that they might carry, right? Here's some more obvious examples, right? Like a medical condition, right? That made accomplishing these tasks far more difficult than it would have been for others. Right? So if you suffered, let's say, from some sort of cognitive issue, like you have trouble reading because of a vision issue, or maybe you constantly are in and out of the hospital because you have some heart condition, right? There's a difference between somebody who is in perfect health and doesn't have to deal with all those things and gets an A in an honors class, versus somebody who is dealing with all those things and still gets an A in the honors class, right? Why? Because there's additional barriers for you getting those things done, right? Like it's not as easy for you to study when you're hopped up on medication, or you have to like be, going in and out of surgery regularly and whatnot, right? Like for God knows what reason, okay? Like there's a difference. And it's not to say that somehow like, you should be given extra consideration. No, what I mean is it's informative because it helps the reader then understand like, oh, they got an A, but they got an A while having to deal with all these other things. That sheds the A in a different light, the A that you got. Okay. Another obvious consideration is socioeconomic barriers, right? If you were so poor, let's say, that you had to work like 20 hours a day, oh, sorry, not 20 hours, 20 hours a week, right? To make sure that your family had some basic goods like food, clean water, shelter, right? Then the fact that you got, let's say, a high SAT score despite having these barriers says something about your motivation, says something about your determination, says something about, what you're able to actually accomplish, right? So again, this is not to create some sort of sob story. I want us to get the intent right? Your goal is to be informative. And it's really helpful to understand the circumstances in which you accomplished the things that you did, right? Maybe because you had to work so much, also not just like your SAT score, let's say, maybe the fact that you weren't able to participate in so many extracurricular activities makes a lot of sense, right? That information wouldn't be available. It might just seem like a choice to work if you don't give them that context. Right, so this is all just about sharing additional information for the application reviewer to, make a more informed decision. Okay, but here's some less obvious things to consider, right? Suppose your family went through some natural disaster that left you living out of hotels for a year while your home was getting repaired, right? Your family is well off financially, let's say, and maybe like your home insurance covered everything, but you still had to face a lot of adjustment and loss during this time, right? It could be the loss of a bunch of sentimental items that meant a lot to you, and so you were depressed for a period. Maybe living out of a hotel led to tension and frustration in that unexpected living situation. I personally remember COVID period being cooped up at home with my kid, and I thought I was going to go insane. I realized I just am not built for that. It was taking an emotional toll on me, right? So these sorts of adjustments can impact your ability to stay focused, to get work done. Again, not trying to make excuses for anything, but it helps put information in context, right? So let's say none of this actually even affected your grade and your participation in activities. You were able to still do all the things that you were able to do before this disaster happened to your home, right? Well, you still went through some stuff that was an added stressor, an added barrier, an added weight to your life. And this is all context for the reader to better understand that, hey, you were able to continue to doing the things that you were able to accomplish even when all this was going on, right? It shows an ability to, adjust, to be able to, grit, your ability to face these sorts of transitions and do it well. I don't know, what information it might provide the reader. But the point is that context does help. If anything, just remember, it's more information, and that's exactly what you want in your personal statement. Okay? All right, so we'll say 1 and 2. Number 3, okay, here's another thing to consider. Right? What are you like as a person? Your values, your personality, your quirks. Okay? Your application reflects behavior and results. That's really what it does, right? The rest of your application anyways, right? So it doesn't actually say anything about who you are as a person, what you're like in real life, what you're about, what you care about deep down, what kind of values you have. Does family even mean anything to you? What does your culture mean to you, if anything? How do friendships play a role in your life? Are you deeply connected to your community? And if so, why? If you're a sibling, what kind of a sibling are you? What gets you angry? What brings you joy? Are you super invested in your hobbies? And if so, why? If you don't say anything about who you are, then you're leaving it up to the reader to guess what kind of a person you are based off of the rest of your application, which, again, as I said, is nothing more than behavior and results. It's the things that you did and the results you attained from it, right? And if you do that, trust me, everything is going to come off robotic, dry, right? So, and again, the reason is that a human being is made up of more than just a list of accomplishments, a list of activities, right? But that's all that exists on the other parts of your application. So one place where you can add some more information, and again, this might overlap with, explaining why it is that you're interested in the things that you're interested in or wanting to accomplish career goals. Why do you have the career goals you do? These might all overlap, right? But the idea is supposed to be this, right? You want to reveal the things about you that make you who you are, that go beyond just what's on the application. And again, the application is very dry because all it shows are your actions, your behaviors, and your results, right? So I've given you some examples of questions you can ask yourself, but you're not limited to these, right? The overarching point that I'm trying to get through is that you need to figure out what the application explicitly, concretely already says about you, and then try to figure out what sort of gaps need to be filled to give a more holistic picture of who you are, right? What is not explicit is actually, in the rest of your application, is actually probably the most important part. It's the stuff that makes everything else in your application make a lot more sense, and it makes it an actual person that, that you can, see as an actual human being instead of just a list of accomplishments, right? Like, who wants to bring a robot into into the university, right? If you're thinking the university is like, oh, what kind of student do we want? Like, we want a robot to come in. Like, that's not going to be the case, right? But it's going to feel like you're nothing more than a robot that just does a bunch of stuff if you leave them with nothing more than what is asked for in the other parts of the application, okay? So again, I'm stressing this, right? Like, the point of a personal statement, first and foremost, is to be informative, to add more information to your application. This has and always will be the first step in an effective personal statement, because that's just the purpose of a personal statement in college applications, right? It's to be informative. Like, they wouldn't ask for it if you were just going to repeat a bunch of stuff, right? It's a way for the reader to gather more information. So if you don't give them more information, you're just doing these essays wrong, period. Okay. Now, to talk about the part that's not as easily understood, okay? You might have all the information lined up, like all the stuff that's not in the other parts of your application. You have, you created a list of, like, I need to talk about these things in my application or in the personal statement because it's not in the other parts of my application. And so now you're asking yourself, like, how can I deliver this information effectively? How can I give it to the reader where the reader will actually want to read it, right? And here is where I think most people just go off the deep end and get things wrong, okay? What I've heard, and it's not just from my own students, it's from some of the essays that I've read myself, is that they get this advice that the essay needs to grab the reader's attention, and it needs to grab the reader's attention quickly. And that's not incorrect. You do, the application committee, is going through so many applications. They're not going to be able to read through any of these essays with, care and consideration and thoughtfulness at every moment. You want to make sure that it's that you stick out, that that you're somebody that they remember, somebody they want to come back to, somebody they're interested in bringing on board, okay? But I think the mistake is that people think that you need a good hook of some kind, right? That you need to, do something to grab their attention, like their interest. And so what students start to do is they're trying to figure out, this doesn't sound very interesting, this doesn't sound unique, and then they start to plot how to go ahead and present themselves, especially how to begin an essay, okay? But the reality is most people don't do this in a way that's very effective. And the culprit for me anyways is very, very clear. It's probably because your essay sounds fake. It sounds inauthentic, right? Your essay sounds like you're trying to convince the reader to care about you or to be interested in you, right? Like, you're trying too hard, right? You're really trying too hard, right? Look, the biggest mistake that people make is that they're trying to get the reader's attention, and it's the whole trying that makes your whole essay just sound crafted. And when it's fake, it starts sounding more like AI generated slop than it does anything else. But I think the reason people do this is that they fundamentally missed what actually makes people invested in you, what makes people interested in getting to know you a bit better, right? That's essentially what these essays should do. It should get them to want to read more, want to know more about you, right? And it's not because of some hook or some interesting line that you give in the beginning, right? Whether it's through writing, visual arts, music, right? What people connect to, what people become deeply invested in is genuineness, it's authenticity, it's seeing a real person, right? That they can develop a real relationship with, right? Not some fake stuff. This is just relationship 101, right? It doesn't matter what the story is or how good the hook is. What matters is that it's real, right? Why does authenticity matter so much? Just think about your own conversations with your friends, right? Do you feel deeply connected to your friends when they just report how their day went, right? If they just talk to you like, let's say they say something like, I did this and that, then I did this, then that. Like, do you feel like emotionally invested or connected to them in any sort of way when they're reporting your life to you like that? Probably not, right? They could even provide some sort of hook to their reporting, but it's still like eventually you're just be like, oh, I'm so checked out. It's hard to stay focused, right? Versus, suppose they reveal a piece of their heart. They're sharing some real stuff that they're working through and what that means for the kind of vision and plan and goals that they've set themselves up for. I want to do this and this with my life. Because, like, oh man, my parents are just really going through some stuff. And, when I'm taking that time to care for them, I realize like just the kind of difference I can make. And, oh man, this is something I really want to do. Right? I'm guessing you actually connect with them more when they're explaining their struggles in this much more open and vulnerable way. Because they're being genuine, like they're being honest about where all this stuff is coming from, right? Like, why is it that they're wanting to do what they're doing, right? When you report on yourself, you're sharing information about yourself, but you're doing so it's like your heart is like one step removed. That's what it feels like, right? And that's why it sounds so different when somebody is just speaking as a close friend, leaning on you and wanting to just share a piece of their heart with you, okay? Because when somebody really shares their heart with you, there's genuine authenticity. Like, usually what you'll find is that when you don't feel connected with the other person and they're sharing factually maybe stuff that you feel like is personal, but you don't feel connected to it, right? It's probably because it's not really coming from the heart. There's lack of authenticity to it. Humans are naturally drawn to authenticity. Like, we get interested and invested in it. We are beings that love real stories, right? Of people that we care about. And we want to understand them better. We want to get to know them better. Okay? If you understand the importance of authenticity, then you should not be focusing so much on the story itself. You shouldn't be focused on what information you give, but rather you should be focusing on how you're telling the story. Is it actually told from the heart, and is it a real reflection of who you are, or are you just presenting yourself in a certain way, right? You don't need to have some grand experience that is life-changing. And I think this is one of the mistakes that are told to students, right? Like, oh, you need to share something significant, or maybe they get this idea into their own head, right? That they needed to have experienced something in life that will blow the readers away, and because they don't have that, they feel all insecure. Like, you don't need to have mind-blowing experience or something unique, right? What you need is for the story to be true to who you are, to honor your own experience, whatever that might be, and just be vulnerable and honest enough to be able to share it with the reader. Okay? It is for this reason that I get angry when people give advice on the topic, on crafting the topic of your essay, right? I've heard advice like, don't write on your immigrant experience because it's not like anything unique and there's a bunch of people who write on it. Or they'll hear something like, talk about your trauma because it'll elicit feelings in the readers, right? Okay, none of this is true at all, okay? None of it. All that, just flat out wrong, okay? People conflate the topic with how the story is told, and I think that's a big mistake, right? And what I'm saying is, like, the story doesn't matter, it's how it's told that matters, right? Like, that you be authentic in it, right? So, like, look, there's no reason not to talk about your immigrant experience if that is an authentic core part of your own experience that informs a lot of who you are and what you want to do in your life, right? Okay. I've had students write on immigrant stories, and it's been absolutely amazing, right? The problem, I think, for most people is that when they do talk about their, some immigrant story, right, they focus on their parents, right? This is the kind of immigrant story that I've read a lot, right, from a lot of these personal statements. It's a lot of, oh, my parents went through this, my parents went through that, they worked so hard and they suffered so much, and so, like, I want to make it, meaningful by getting into college. Okay, it's like, look, you said a bunch of stuff about your parents. You said nothing about yourself. Like, this is all stuff that impacted your parents, didn't impact you. What about you? Right? Like, there's nothing personal here that you're sharing about yourself. You're not revealing anything about yourself. You've revealed a lot of stuff about your family background, not about you. That's the problem, right? The problem is that there's no personal significance. That's the problem. It's not because you talked about the immigrant story. It's because you talked about your parents' immigrant story, not your own. Okay? Similar to, like, it's a trauma thing, right? Like, trauma, like, if you write a story where you're just trauma dumping, okay, like, it's not going to be very effective, right? Why? It's not because of the story itself. It's because, like, if you do trauma dumping in the following way, like, he's like, oh, I just had such a hard life. No. Like, what have you revealed about yourself? You've shared facts that seem like something, I don't know, like that maybe sounds like you're vulnerable because you're sharing some information that maybe a lot of other people would be hesitant to share. I don't know. Maybe that's what you're thinking. But the reality is when you do this kind of trauma dumping, like, it doesn't actually reveal anything about you. Like, it doesn't say anything about how you've overcome that trauma, what you've done with it, what you've become from it. And that's where the real inauthenticity starts to creep in, right? It starts sounding like all you're doing is trying to tell a sob story, and that's why it's ineffective, right? This also goes for humor, right? Like, I think I've heard advice that you should never use humor in these essays. It's like, look, you can insert humor in your essays if that's who you really are. The problem is that a lot of people are just trying to add humor to make themselves look to be a certain way, or they say some stuff that's foul. Like, that's a problem, right? Like, sometimes humor doesn't hit with the audience, right? But if it's really authentic to you, like, if you're a stand-up comedian, like, that's what you do in your spare time, like, that's just part of who you are, right? Just make sure that you don't say things that are, in violation of university policy or mission statement or whatnot, okay? Are you getting the pic? I'm hoping you're getting the picture here, right? Like, you don't need to be worried about what topic you discuss. I think this is where a lot of students get tripped up. They think that they have nothing to talk about because their life was just fairly cookie cutter and yada yada, like, whatever. That's most of us, right? Like, we go through some things that other people don't, but, a lot of the experience that we have, there's some similarities to what others experience as well. So it won't sound particularly unique. You don't need to have a unique story. You don't have to have something interesting to tell. You just need it to be honest, open, and reveal something about your truest self. And when you do that, when you speak in that way, when you engage in a conversation in that way, then what you'll find is that people are drawn to you, want to know more about you, not because you're anything special or unique, but rather it's real. It's real. It's not random people on the internet. It's a real person. It's not a piece of paper with some words on it. It's a real person. It's not a set of accolades and grades and, SAT scores and whatnot. It's a real person. And that's really what is going to connect for the reader. On a side note, this is the reason I think that J. Cole's music is pretty empty. If you don't know who J. Cole is, you can listen to J. Cole once, and then you'll realize very quickly, dry, boring, can't connect, right? People keep on telling me that they connect with his music. I can't make sense of it, right? Like, he isn't very vulnerable, right? Maybe the topics he says are relatable in some way, but if you actually listen to what he says, like, he's not emotionally vulnerable in any way. He shares some details about himself, but it's not really coming off as very authentic because of the distinction that I'm pointing out. There's a difference between reporting on your life or the things that you've seen or things that you've experienced versus sharing it from the heart. Like, man, like this is something that I really like. It means a lot to me. You speak in a different way when you're talking about something that really matters to you in that way, right? Plus, so much of his storytelling is about other people's experience. Like, remember what I just said about like the immigrant story, right? Like when you're talking about other people, like it's a disconnect. It's not personal. It's you're reporting on other people, right? These are not really deep reflections about anything at all, right? All this to say, don't write your personal statements like the way that J. Cole raps, okay? It will not hit for readers, just like J. Cole's music never hits for me, okay? If you want to call me a hater, it's actually very accurate. I will take no offense. Come at me. I don't care. I will defend my position on this. J. Cole is terrible, awful music. All right. Now, okay, to get back on track. The real problem for students, I think, is that these personal statements, it's not that they don't understand the importance of authenticity. I usually have no problem getting through to students that, you need to be authentic, What I struggle with, I think, is that students just don't know how to be authentic. And that makes perfect sense to me. Why? Because it's not something you just turn on and off. It's something you cultivate through experience, through challenges, through deep reflections, through repeatedly being honest with yourself and others. Like, if you haven't done the emotional work, you're just gonna suck at it, right? Like just like any other skill that you didn't develop. Like the students who are honestly best at writing personal statements are the ones who are regularly reflecting on their own feelings and their own experience, right? They step away from their academic and social life and just spend time with their own heart. These are the students who regularly journal about, how they're feeling, who ask themselves why they're feeling the way that they're feeling, who don't rush through and try to just move on to the next thing, but have practiced mindfulness and sat with their deepest fears and regrets and joys and pains and all of it, right? These are students who've maybe gotten therapy and had somebody to bounce these thoughts and feelings off of, right? And they've been doing it for years. Like they don't do it just like a few weeks before they start working on these essays. They've been doing it for years. And so part of the difficulty with being authentic is that life is like designed to, in some ways, like to get you to, especially like for college applications, they're designed to constantly get you to be thinking about the next thing you need to do. And we're so focused on, what you're putting in all the other parts of the application, like the things that you've accomplished, that at some point you just start losing yourself. Like you just stop being authentic. You just become a shell of yourself. You just become a set of activities. You just become a set of accolades, right? And this is just sometimes kind of, for many students that I've worked with, like this is just kind of how their life is designed, right? As a child, you may have gotten into trouble or dismissed by your caregiver for expressing how you feel. Like in school, your peers might have mocked you for, instead of being supportive about feeling the way that you feel. Let's say maybe you're jealous about a friend or significant other, or angry or whatnot. Like people a lot of times prefer peace. And so things that, create tension, they'll just be very dismissive of. And that doesn't allow you the opportunity to just be like, hey, maybe I have a good reason for feeling the way that I feel, right? As an adult, you're told that you need to behave in certain ways in professional settings, even if it goes against some of your core values. Like we have these sorts of tensions all the time. We're constantly pressured into presenting ourselves in a certain way to make ourselves more acceptable. Like this is just part of living in a society, right? Like humans are social beings, so this is just kind of part of living in a society. But one of the consequences of not slowing down, not like actually purposefully taking the time to step back and reflect on, where your thoughts, your, directing your life, your goals you're setting for yourself, like where that's all coming from. When you don't actually purposely try to do that, like it's no surprise that you would suck at being authentic, right? Because you probably just don't know yourself. How can you be authentic with other people if you can't be authentic with yourself, right? Like, you've maybe inadvertently have been acting for so long, putting on a mask and being somebody that you're not, in order to maybe fit in, or in order to, be accepted, or, embraced by a community, or because you were told that it was the right thing to do. You just never bothered to stop and take off that mask and look in the mirror and to just be honest with yourself. And honestly, it shows in the writing. Like, people keep thinking that somehow they could fake it, but that you really can't. Like, you can tell when it's real. You sense when a student is, trying to craft a story about themselves that they don't believe. And once you start doing that, your essay is going to sound fake and the reader's just going to disconnect. So then the real question on the second point of being authentic, it really becomes, how can I be more authentic, right? Just not just in the personal statement, but just maybe in general. Because again, like, you can't just turn it on and off. You need to just be better about being authentic, just across the board. And my answer to everything, all of my students know, go get you some therapy, right? Therapy honestly would be ideal, because these are trained professionals that are there to give you the space to be your true self. That's their job, right? And they're trained not to respond in ways that discourage you from opening up, but the exact opposite. Actually, they are trained to encourage you to kind of dig deeper. So I think therapy, I think air therapy is ideal. But that's not the only thing that you can do. So I have some suggestions that I found useful for students. But again, these are things that you need to start on years before you even get to the personal statement. Okay? So I suggest you start earlier rather than later, because, as I said, it's a skill. It requires time. It requires practice. It requires multiple layers of reflection to really get better at this, right? So ideally, as early as elementary school, but if not, then please, at least in the beginning of high school, so that you had years under your belt, so that by the time you get to applying for college, you'll have something of substance to really say. Okay, so a couple of activities. 1, write out a timeline of your life, including your kind of big picture goals for the future. You don't necessarily have to have goals for the future, but if you do, like, you could put them as part of the timeline. You could go into the future, go into the past. Okay, on this timeline, note any vivid memories that you have. Okay, these memories do not need to be particularly eventful or unique. It just needs to be memory that is sticky. Like, it's something that you just never forgot. Like, usually what you'll find is that memories that are sticky in this way are actually very meaningful for you, right? Don't judge the memory as being significant or not. If it's a sticky memory, it's probably has some weight for you. I have one like that it's like I'm telling you, like, a lot of these don't have to be particularly like deep. I used to, when I was a kid, I used to have this recurring nightmare that the neighbors were chasing me as I rode this bike. It's like a really old movie from my own childhood, E.T. In the movie, there's an alien, and the kid that discovers the alien becomes friends with them riding a bike. There's a bunch of people chasing after him. And then E.T., this alien, has the ability to help the bike like start flying up. And then that's how he's able to escape, okay, from people chasing after him. In my dream, the bike would start to kind of do the E.T. thing where it would start floating up, and then all of a sudden it would just come back down to earth, and the neighbors would catch me, and then that's when I would wake up. I have to this day, I have no idea why I was having that recurring dream. But I had the recurring dream. The point is that the memory stuck, right? Why it stuck, that's the whole thing. That's something to explore, right? So first, just mark those vivid memories that you have. Then, track similarities and patterns in these memories that you have, right? Not all memories will be relevant, but you might start noticing that a lot of, the things that you do, a lot of the memories that you have that are vivid for you, they might have a similar theme. And that's not an accident. It's probably revealing something about you, right? So you could use these timelines and noting these vivid memories and actually writing them down and slowing down to think about it as a chance for you to really ask yourself, like, look, why are these memories so sticky for me? Like, why is it that these memories are the ones that seem to have stuck around and mattered enough that my brain didn't want to let it go, as opposed to a bunch of other stuff that we forget, like memories we forget all the time, right? And what does this have to do with what I'm doing now? Like, what kind of activities I happen to be interested in, or what kind of hobbies that I taken up, and or maybe even like your future aspirations, right? Like, why do I want to go into these careers? For some people, they have a clear answer, but I think even then you want to slow down and just reflect on it. Just because sometimes you notice some patterns, some interesting insights into yourself that you might not have noticed before, right? Okay, so that's one activity you can do. 2, you can learn to identify your own feelings. Okay. Anytime you feel something, anything, instead of reacting to it, this is kind of like if you've practiced mindfulness, this is what mindfulness is really teaching you, is to lean in to being curious about your feelings, about what you're experiencing, about what you're thinking, right? I want you to take a moment to be more aware of how you're feeling, and instead of judging it, just acknowledge it and then be curious about it, right? And when you're angry, like, don't tell yourself, oh, you shouldn't be angry, you should get over it, right? Don't tell yourself that. Just sit with your anger, be angry, and then just start asking, like, why am I angry? Like, what am I so angry about? Why am I more angry about this than somebody else who experienced the same thing or similar, something similar, and don't feel angry about it? When did I start feeling angry about this, right? Like, these are all good questions to ask to gain some insight into how you operate, right? Like, look, think about it like this. How are you going to tell somebody else who you are if you don't know how you operate? Like, if you don't know yourself enough to be able to share that information, right? There's a reason that there's a disconnect, because you're probably disconnected with yourself. You don't understand yourself. So whatever you say to the other person, it's just some made up stuff that doesn't actually reflect who you are, because how could you? Like, you don't even know who you are, right? So, like, you need to kind of like take the time to slow down and see, learn some stuff about yourself. Like, why do I react the way that I do in these types of situations? You can do this for yourself in your mind or through journaling. Like, if you have close friends or family members that you can actually trust, I mean, I'm not going to judge. I don't know. Whoever is in your life, if there are people that you can trust to know how to respond well to your sharing, like, real feelings, and instead of just trying to get you to feel differently or just trying to cheer you up, have the ability to just kind of sit there with you and be curious with you about those feelings. If you have people like that in your life, then you could have conversations with them, and that's helpful too, right? The goal here is to just start being more honest and curious about yourself, and to better understand, like, why you feel the way that you feel, like what makes you tick, what pisses you off, what brings you joy, right? Like, that's all that authenticity is. It's just being honest with yourself, and this is just one place to start. Okay. All right. 3rd, learn how to be an active listener and just have deep personal conversations with your friends and family. Right. Like, I'm talking like real honest ones, right? I think that this is a lot easier as you get older, at least from my experience, especially with family, because I found that parents, especially, but sometimes I experience it with like aunts and uncles as well, right? When you're a child, they see you as a child, and it's not that completely changes as you get older, but at least when you're in like your 20s and 30s, they feel like they might, like, it's more age appropriate or something, that they can share some details without you getting traumatized by it, right? But I found I've done this with my own kid, with my parents. You could make it into a game. Like, there's these card games. Like, one that I really enjoyed is Do You Really Know Your Family? There's also another one that I got as a gift for my parents. They had Korean on there so that they could, because they can't speak English. Parents Are Human. And then so these are ways that you just ask questions, some of them deeper than others, to just try to get to know one another. I think learning how to have those kinds of personal conversations and just being kind of thoughtful when you're having them helps you to kind of see the difference between the mere reporting of facts about a person and somebody just sharing a piece of their heart, right? Because a lot of these conversations will lead to people just sharing not facts, but feelings, right? Like the stuff that really makes people tick. Okay. All right. So these are just a few exercises you can do to just start working on it, like start learning to be authentic. But like I said, best thing to do for me, therapy. 10 years of it, more now, and life-changing. Life-changing, absolutely life-changing. If you're looking for some more examples, I actually created a podcast series, The Art of Vulnerability. It's in my own podcast. I created it, I think I mentioned it in the introduction to that whole series. I created it as an example, using myself as an example to show students what it looks like to practice authenticity across a range of things in your life. And I purposely chose to talk about elements of my life that are wide and varied for this reason, because I want students to understand that it's not the specific content that matters as much as how you present it. Because the truth is, if it's really meaningful for you, then it's meaningful for you, and it'll show and it'll connect with the audience if you actually are sharing stuff that is really genuinely meaningful for you, right? And so I created that series as just an example of what it might start sounding like. Now, I would not recommend that you write your personal statement in the way that I speak in those episodes, but it's just kind of more like a, hey, this is the kind of exercise that might be helpful for you to do, right? Reflecting on your life, getting a better sense of who you are, where you're coming from. What you're seeing in that series is honestly much more of me after years of therapy and developing a deeper insight. But I imagine, like, after another 10 years later, I might have a different set of insights, and I might tell the story. The narrative might look a little different in light of new evidence and new understanding of myself. But without the ability to truly, like, understand yourself, like, you're not, like, to piece yourself to, like, you need to lay yourself on the line. Like, there's no other way to make a personal statement effective. It's not a creative writing exercise. Like, it's not something that you can pretend your way into doing well. Like, there's a way of writing that is reflected in these types of essays that's very different than an academic essay. And if you just write as trying to fill in, like, information, just like information gathering and information giving and nothing more, then it's going to feel dry. Like, you might still get accepted into some of these colleges, but it won't be because of your personal statement. It'll be despite your personal statement, you got in, right? Like, it didn't hurt you, but it probably didn't help, okay? But yeah, when I read an essay and I find myself just kind of feeling bored, disconnected, usually that's a sign that there's something missing, and what that missing thing is usually you, the person, right? So do yourself a favor, like, learn who you truly are, the deeper you, right? Not like just facts and information about you, but like the core of what makes you who you are, right? That's the person that people want to have a genuine relationship with, not the fake stuff, right? So once you find that person, you'll find that everything else that I talked about, right, in terms of kind of being able to talk about, you know, why you do the things, like, all this stuff becomes a lot easier because you have a good sense of who you are. So, you know, let's see a little more of your truest self. And again, that's going to require you to have that understanding. I gave some suggestions for ways you can start, but hopefully you're starting on it early enough that, you know, for your own sake, you have a good sense of who you are before you even get to having to write these kinds of essays. Okay? All right, I hope that gives you some clarity. You know, there's honestly no need to go through Reddit and look through all the different advice. Like, if you follow these two basic principles when it comes to writing an effective personal statement, your personal statement will be fairly good to begin with. Beyond that, you just need people who are experienced to take a look, who know something about the college application process, about how not all, but, you know, majority of these readers might take what you say, and just to be able to give you individualized personal feedback. Like, that's what you need. There's no other way to improve your writing without that sort of feedback. if your parents fit that bill, then yeah, that's great. If you have a teacher that is willing to do this for you, that's great as well. But I want to be honest with you. Like, not everyone has the experience, has the insight to even know what they're looking for. So you want to at least try to find people in your life that have this kind of experience. If not, hire somebody. But that runs into equity issues for me. So, I've announced this before. If you are a community college student anywhere in the United States, you're transferring and you need to write one of these personal statements your for your application, come find me. I'm helping out any and everyone I can. Or at the current moment, I've been offering this for a couple of years now. I'm not getting enough students, so I do have enough space to be able to handle a lot more than I am helping right now. Because that's, at the end of the day, like I said, you need that individualized feedback, and not everyone has access to it. Because a lot of times you kind of have to pay for it, or the people that are wanting to help, they might not have the time. So I want to at least be one more resource. So you can find me Discord, YouTube, email, website. There's a lot of points of contact. Find me, let me know, and then I'll do what I can to, if not myself, I will at least try to connect you with somebody who can give you that sort of help. Okay? All right. Good luck to you.